Gilman, Cindy Gilman's son. So listen, participate, be inspired, know that you can discover your potential. Here is Dan Gilman.
The day of the fire, I was sitting in my office in East Greenwich, and for many people who are intuitive, when something happens that's going to affect a large number of people, we go into what is called psychic attack. For me, the day of the fire was very unnerving. I smelled smoke, I tasted smoke. I was very uncomfortable. I called my clients and canceled my afternoon clients. I left my office and went home, and by that point, as time went on, I was getting shakier and weaker, and I knew something was about to happen. That morning, about 8:30, 9 o'clock, I got up, made a cup of coffee, and sat down in my dining area, trying to keep myself calm. A young man appeared to me in a very disturbing or uncomfortable form.
There was a vision of a charred boy who kept saying to her, "Call my father, call my father."
He appeared very briefly. I was holding my coffee cup and shaking, and he then disappeared. I opened up my personal phone book, which opened up to the K page. I have known Dave Kane, Nikki's father, for many years through radio. Although we were never close personally, I knew very little about his family.
And good old number 41.
When I opened the phone book, his name was the only name on that page. I called his answering service and left a message. I said, "Dave, this is Cindy Gilman. I heard about what happened last night, and if there's anything I can do to help, please call me." He called me that night, and his reply was, "How did you know?"
I was kind of confused because it hadn't been publicized yet that we couldn't find Nick. And so I called her, and she started to say if there was anything she could do after this terrible tragedy. And I asked her how she knew.
I said, "How did I know what?"
And she said, "I should have said something. I should have said something."
And I started shaking again.
And I got a little upset.
He said, "I lost my son last night."
And I hung up the phone and said I'd talk to her later. And the next day or the day after, I called her back, and she said, "You've got to hear this story."
Good afternoon, and welcome to Discover Your Potential. I'm your host, Dan Gilman, and I have an extraordinary guest. Dave Kane is a radio broadcast. Here's Dave Kane.
I thought you were going to have an interesting guest on. Oh, that's me. Oh, okay.
That's you.
I was all excited to see what you had.
Yeah, so Dave Kane is not only really well known in Rhode Island, he's also written a book. It is called 41 Signs of Hope. And just a moment ago, you saw a video clip. I'm pointing to the mic, like the mic reel is showing the video clip. The video clip is from 41, and I don't know if you want to tell the audience a little bit about the movie.
The movie is an award-winning documentary, and it's about our son Nicky. Our son Nicky passed in the Station nightclub fire 18 years ago. It was the fourth largest nightclub fire in the country's history. Nicky was the youngest victim. He was 18, and beginning the day after he passed, we started to get signs from Nicky letting us know that he was well and okay and safe. And that's basically what the book is about, and certainly what the documentary is about. A documentary can be seen on Amazon Prime and also iTunes if you'd like to rent it. And it's really cool. And it features a young lady you might know, Dan.
Yes.
Your mom, right?
She was young back then, yes.
Yeah, well, we all were. Yeah.
And actually in the show notes and in the show, we'll provide all the links to both the book and the movie.
Thank you. Yeah, it's really very interesting. And your mom, of course, and I have known each other for years. And in the movie you'll see, and I know you know the story, but
our listeners would, our listeners would love to hear it.
It was the day after the fire. I got a call from your mom. Now I do talk radio and have done it for many years. I've been fired from some of the finest radio stations in New England, and your mom called me the morning after the fire and said to me, "I heard what happened. If there's anything I can do, please let me know." Now I didn't understand the call because I used to have your mom on my radio show to do readings, and it was really cool. But I hadn't spoken to her, I think, almost a year or so. So I didn't know what she was talking about, what she meant. And I called her, and she said, "Well, I watched the fire last night. It was on TV, of course." And she said, "I just wanted to come on your show and see if I could help people who have lost somebody." And then I told her about Nikki. And she said to me, "Oh, I should have said something." And I got to tell you, Dan, I mean, I was not in a good mood that morning. Yeah. And I thought, oh, great, here's a medium that's going to tell me she knew something she had no idea of. Mm-hmm. And I hung up on your mom. Mm-hmm. A couple of days later, I called back to apologize. And she said, "You have to hear this story." She stayed up a lot of the night watching the fire. She finally went to bed. The next morning, she got up and made herself a cup of tea, sat at her kitchen table, and she had what she said was a vision of a charred boy. And the boy said to her, "Please call my father. Please call my father." Mm-hmm. She had no idea who this was, and she just went to her own phone book and flipped it open, and my name was the only name on the 2 pages. She had no idea that the boy that was talking to her was Nicky. It was the 4th largest nightclub fire in the country's history in little old Rhode Island, right? Yeah. And it was amazing because there was a lot of controversy about it. People went to prison because of it. And this was a little restaurant that your mom used to bring you to when it was P. Brillo's, she told me. And it was only the capacity was 60 people. Yeah. And there were 400 people in that club that night. Wow. 100 people died, 200 people seriously injured. And we have been talking about it and dealing with it. And I did a lot of fighting with people to get justice for these people, and also to build what is now a beautiful park at that location. And anybody can see it online, the Station Nightclub Memorial Park. You can check it out and see how cool it is.
Wow. Actually, ironically, I'll just bring this up. A dear friend of mine, after my mother passed away, we had a quick, conversation. He had no idea that she was connected to the station fire. So when he attended the memorial service that we had, that you were there, he commented, he said, "I had no idea," because he was really connected to that too after the event happened. So it's like, oh, wow. So I kind of pieced it together. So there's a lot of, not coincidence, but
happenstance, synchronicity is really the word. A third of the people were from Massachusetts. There were people there from Connecticut. You can't talk to anybody in Rhode Island that didn't know somebody, related to somebody, or past somebody who was affected by that fire. Who was not affected? Everybody was.
I'd love to talk more about Nikki. Nikki was an extraordinary.
Nikki, thank you.
Child.
Well, okay, if I have to. Nikki is an extraordinary young man. He is a writer, a composer, a singer, an actor, a comedian, a playwright. A year before he died, Nikki wrote a play called "They Walk Among Us." The play is about teenagers who die and come back as angels. And it's an incredible, incredible play. You could never imagine that a 16-year-old at the time could write something like this. And at the end of the play, one of the angels that trying to help this young boy, and she says to the boy, "In the end, everything, and I do mean everything, is going to be just fine." And the last line of the play is, "Do not fear to hope." So we put that on Nikki's headstone. Do not fear to hope. And his legacy has been hope on every level that I can imagine. He's shown us many signs, hundreds of signs, many around the number 41, but music and license plates. And I'll give you an example. About, I don't know, 8 years ago, we were tagging a Christmas tree. Nikki liked doing that, so my wife and I were at a Christmas tree farm and tagging a tree. And my wife, from the time the fire started, my wife worried that Nikki suffered in the blaze, that he felt the flames. It drove her crazy. She couldn't get over it. But every medium we had been to, your mom and the others, all said to us the same thing: no pain. That was the phrase they used, no pain. When we asked, they said no pain. When we didn't ask, they said no pain. So we were at the Christmas tree farm, and Joanne was in that mode again, and I was saying to her, come on, honey, please. Don't you understand? He doesn't want you sad. He doesn't want you crying. He wants you to know that he's fine, that he had no pain. And we get in my car, and we're going up Breakneck Hill Road in Lincoln. And because I don't know enough to shut up, I kept talking, and I said, for God's sakes, Joanne, what do you want this kid to do? Put it in writing? And as soon as I said that, a car coming from the other direction had the vanity plate, no pain. And that's one of my favorite stories. I love it.
Yeah, that is a great story.
Yeah.
I remember you mentioning that. And you mentioned too that he wrote the screenplay, and you have some interesting news about that as well.
Well, he wrote, it was actually a one-act play for stage that we produced and shot for PBS locally. They run it every year. And you can see clips of the play in 41, the movie. And our friend John Land, who is an internationally known thriller writer. I mean, this is a guy, Danny, gets his name above the title. Okay.
Yes.
So he's well known, and he heard about
on the show a few times.
Actually. Great. And he's been on the show. And he read about Nikki, and he wanted to meet us. And in the conversation, we told him about Nikki's play, and he took a look at it, and then he decided he would like to make a feature-length motion picture script out of it. And he asked permission, and we said okay. And he made Nikki a full author. He put both their names on the play, on the script. And just about a month ago, we made a deal to sell the option for that film, and we're in the process now of getting it put together and getting it out and about. And John registered Nikki in the Writers Guild of America, and his code number, his ID number on the Writers Guild ends in 41.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
and as you know, not to bring up 41, but my mother, as you mentioned too, you pointed out, she passed away April 1st.
Yeah, that was really something for us, because she was the first person. Nikki went to your mom first. Now, he has brought us so many different people. He's figured out a way to get people to us. John Land, he got to us. And this Silver Winds people, it is such a weird story of how Nick got us to them. It's stunning. And I'll tell you about part of it. And so your mom, who I said was the first person, when she passed on 4/1.
Yes.
And we took that as a real sign that she and Nikki are going to be together, that she and Nick are going to do a lot of stuff. It's interesting, because I've learned, or feel that I know now, that spirit hooks up with each other. That spirit, they figure a way to do things for us.
Yeah.
By conspiring. I was on the air one day doing a radio show, and a lady called me, and she said to me, I was talking about Nick and 41. And she said, I can't believe I'm listening to you today. I said, why? She said, I work 7 days a week. She said, I'm never off. I have a day off today. She said, I never listen to the radio, and I hate talk radio. She said, but today I'm listening to you, and you're talking about your son. Yeah. She said, my son committed suicide about 15 years ago. She said, and it destroyed me. And I've only been back on my feet and back to work about 5 years. She said, and the other night, I thought I saw my son in my house. She said, it really upset me because I thought I was losing it and going to be back in rehab or whatever it was.
Sure.
And I said, I'll tell you what I think happened. I said, I think your son and my son have hooked up. And I think your son wanted to come see you, but he was afraid of sending you over the fence,
Yeah.
And Nikki said to him, you want to talk to your mom? Let's go talk to my dad. And somehow they got her to be listening and me to be talking about them that day in order to get through to them. I told you about this interview that I did with Bob Olson on YouTube 9 years ago, and I'm still hearing from people who are telling me all kinds of stories, telling me that their child has come through to them, usually in a dream, and that my son is with them. Now, I don't get that. I mean, I'm thinking, if I dreamt about my son, I think it was my son. I wouldn't think somebody else's kid is there. And yet these people are telling me that they know that Nikki's involved. And all of the mediums, including your mom, of course, have told us that Nikki's job now is to help children connect with their parents. Now, I'll tell you a quick story, and then I'll tell you about the screenplay, because one of the mediums that we went to, that your mom certainly is friends with, is Robert Brown.
Yes.
The international medium from England. And
he's been on the show too.
Oh, great. I'm glad. Good. Did he mention my name? No, he didn't. Okay. When we went to see Robert Brown, it was very interesting because he told us things that we didn't know. Not only could he not know, but that we didn't know. He told us right where Nikki was standing in the fire. He told us about Nikki stopping to help a woman who had panicked and thrown herself on the floor. And he stopped and helped her up, tried to get her up. A woman who survived the fire 3 years later came up to me and told me the exact same story. So everything Robert Brown said was true, but here's the thing. At the end, he looked at us and he said, your son wants me to tell you one more thing. He wants me to tell you that the show must go on. And what Robert Brown could not have known, and only my wife and I knew, those were the very last words Nikki spoke to me. His band was supposed to open for Great White on Friday night, and he was going on Thursday night of the fire. He was going on Thursday to check out the room. And I was giving him a ride to his girlfriend Gabby's house, and I found out he wasn't getting much money for this gig. And I said, Nick, it's show business. I mean, if you do it for free, they'll let you. Right. And, yeah, Dad, I know, rolling his eyes. And when we got to his girlfriend's house, I said, honey, I didn't mean to pick on you, but I don't know why you'd sell God's talent so short. And he gave me a hug and a kiss, and he said, Dad, the show must go on, and got out of the car. Now, that story has an addendum story now because of the movie that we're producing. Through a series of circumstances, including a person, a woman that I dated 46 years ago, came into this whole deal and got us together with this production company. And I met with the Tanya and Brad Burt, their name is. And I sat with them and we were talking about Nikki, and they wanted to know stories. And so I told them the Robert Brown story I just told you. And when the very first time I mentioned the phrase "show must go on," she stopped. She said, "Oh my God, stop, stop, stop." I said, "What?" She looked at her husband. She said, "Did you hear that?" Well, they came in. They had just produced a movie in Rhode Island. They were still there, as a matter of fact, from that. And they'd been in Rhode Island about 3 weeks. And the whole time, she had this phrase in her head, the show must go on. It was driving her crazy. She kept saying it to her husband whenever there would be a problem with the film. Well, the show must go on. It got to be like a running joke. And then when I said that, it flipped them out. So that was real evidence to us that Nikki was very much involved in putting all of this together with the show must go on. The show must go on.
Yeah. Also, I'd love to talk about your book too, 41 Signs of Hope,
Yeah.
because we didn't really get a chance to talk about that.
I just happen to have a copy of it here
I
in
know,
case
that's
anybody
great.
wanted to see it. There it is. Just have it in my back pocket just in case. Yeah, I wrote this book in 2005.
Mhm.
It took me almost 2 years because, frankly, the coincidences when we started getting them, although impressive, a lot of them I wrote off to my own grief, to my own imagination. I'm a writer, I'm a performer, I'm an ad-libber, so it would be very easy for me to conjure up something in my head that but eventually these things began to pile and pile and pile and were so stunning
Hmm.
that I could no longer write it off as my grief or as coincidence, as you said, or happenstance. Something was going on here very big. And that's when I started writing down all of them, not all of them, many of the signs. My wife
Hmm.
has a huge plastic box, and in it are reams of paper with other instances that were not big, but for instance, one day she was coming home. She was coming down a road near our house, and there was a portable radar unit out, and it's telling you how fast you're going. And the
Sure.
car right in front of her went by. It said 25. She went by. It went to 41. So,
Wow.
so all these little things. So
Yeah.
that's how the book started. And it's only a thin book, a lot of stories in it. It's not a novel. It's just each story has a different, mode and setup. And I didn't make it large. I could have made it the size of an encyclopedia, but I just left it at that because I just wanted to make the point. So people will start to understand their own signs. That's what Nick wants me to do, to get people to see and to hear their own signs. You're driving to Stop and Shop and you're thinking about Aunt Tilly who passed. And then you walk in Stop and Shop and her favorite song is on the radio.
Yeah.
Peekaboo.
Yeah.
It's Aunt Tilly. Those are the things that people need to know about, and that's what I've tried to tell them about. When I started doing 41 Signs of Hope, that talk, I put a talk together after I did the book. And I take my favorite examples, and I have a PowerPoint demonstration that can show you the things that I say. I have pictures of Nikki. I have a picture of Nikki standing behind my wife, Joanne, 2.5 years after the fire. And he's in the picture. So EVPs are electronic voice phenomenon. People around the world collect the voices of people who have passed. And what happens is they go into a room with a recording device and they ask a couple of questions. Is anybody here? Do you have any messages? And then they leave the recorder running.
Mm-hmm.
And then in a few minutes, they stop it, rewind it. And many, many times there is a voice on the recording.
Wow.
Have you heard about these? This is
I
really
have.
cool.
We had a physical medium on the show. His name is Stuart Alexander. He's out in the UK.
Yeah. Okay.
And he sent me a collection of CDs.
Well,
with
some of
EVPs.
them are very difficult to understand. They sound like shortwave radio, and you have to listen to it a few times,
Yeah.
Well, I had a woman one day there was a writing there was a booklet that goes out once a month for the people that do this.
Mm-hmm.
And Joanne was written up because she was with Maureen Hancock.
Oh, okay.
And Maureen said to her, do you ever hear Nikki call to you?
Mm-hmm.
And she said, well, sometimes I think I do. She said, well, this time he's going to call you and there'll be no mistaking it. And that day when she brought the tape home, Nick's oldest brother, Chris, listened to the tape. And right on the tape, when Maureen says that, you hear a little boy's voice say, Mommy, very clearly.
Wow.
So that was written up in the journal for these people to do this. And a woman contacted me from Southern California and said, Mr. Kane, I think your son is sending me EVPs.
Mm-hmm.
And my immediate response, Dan, was Nutburger. Here we go. Somebody who doesn't know Nick, I never heard of, couldn't
Right.
pick Nick out in the lineup, but here she is. He's
Yeah.
sending her EVPs. But my father used to say, trust everyone, but always cut the cards,
Mm.
So she sent me a couple of things, and one was a little tough to hear. And then on a Sunday morning, I got up and there was an email there from her. She said, please tell me if this is your son's voice.
Mm-hmm.
And I listened to it. And as God is my witness, it is my son's voice. And he says, Mom and Dad, this is Nick. Clear as a bell.
Wow. And you have that as a recording?
I do.
Wow.
And it's just amazing. And it's just one of the many things that people need to know are possible and are real. And that's the point. He's done everything he could to let us know there's nothing to fear. We're relying on, because I tell people it's not just that our loved ones are safe, but when it's our turn, we'll be safe. And everything will be okay with us too. So my hospice talk is about that. And then I have done nursing death and dying classes, and I talk to people about when people are passing. Many times they'll see somebody or talk to somebody or say something to them. And I tell the nurses, this is not medication. This really is people who have already passed coming to help this person make the transition. At least that's my belief. I'm not an expert on this. I don't know, but it's what I believe.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And you also mentioned you do comedy shows as well. That's I'd love to hear about that.
Well, yeah, I've
not to jump from.
That's okay. I do a lot of great stuff. Nikki loved coming to my Misgivings show. I do two shows. One is called Misgivings. It's an evening with an Irish Catholic priest, Father Patrick Aloysius Misgivings. Father Misgivings is an old Irish priest. He has bingos, but he calls the numbers out in Latin, so the Protestants can't win. There's a collection, a raffle, a bingo game, a lot of fun. And I have another show called Jokes My Irish Father Told Me. And guess what that's about? I just sit and tell people a little bit about my parents and my background and some of the jokes my dad loved to tell. No matter what happened in the world, he would say, that reminds me of the time, and there would be a story or a joke that was just fun to hear.
Wow, that's great.
Great entertainer.
Yeah, that's great. And where if somebody wants to see your shows, are you
I only perform for nonprofits.
Oh, okay.
Churches, Elks Clubs, KFCs, any charity or nonprofit. If somebody would like to know about that, they can just go to my website, davekane.net, and all the information is there. All my contact information and samples for the show and stuff. davekane.net. Yep, there it is.
There you go. So davekane.net. Excellent. Yeah, I'd like to hear more stories.
More stories?
Yeah, you've got so many great stories, and I'll kind of weave them in. And
I've got tons of stories. I'm trying to think of one of the things that was very interesting was that your mom said to us when we went to see her after Nick passed. One of the first things she said to me was, "Who's Frank?" And I said, "Frank's my dad." She said, "Well, Frank said that he did for Nicky what he never did for you. He watched out for him."
Wow.
Now, my dad had his problems. I like to say he was an Irish magician. He used to walk down the street and turn into a bar, and he had a lot of problems. But when I had Nick, one day Joanne was coming home with Nick, and she saw a man's feet running up the stairs in the house. And she said, "Oh my God, Nick, somebody's in the house." And Nick, being his like his father, went and got a broom and ran up the stairs, and there was nobody up there.
Wow.
And Joanne remembers that the pants were cuffed pants, white socks, and wingtip shoes. And that would have been my dad's outfit, certainly. So he, I guess it was just an example of him being with Nick. I have another story that I could tell you having to do with your mom. A very unusual circumstance was we had all of the family together one weekend, and we all went over to see your mom, and she read the whole family, the immediate family.
Mhm.
And I got to tell you that Nicky did not do well in high school. He hated high school. He was very smart. He was very, but I think he was too hip for the room, and it drove him crazy. And we did the whole thing, getting him tested. He's the only person I know, and Joanne and I couldn't think of anybody else. We didn't know that they gave out an F- in English. Now, how do you give an F-?
Yeah.
But this young man is the young man who took 4 guitar lessons and wrote 50 songs. He wrote that terrific play that's now going to be a feature-length motion picture. He wrote prose. He wrote everything. It was cool.
Yeah.
So we're with your mom, and it just bothered me. I finally gave in. I wanted him to graduate high school. This was I just finally, Joanne and I talked about it, and she said, "Look, let's let him quit, and we'll get him a GED, and then we'll get him into the community college and get him up and running that way." And so I said, okay, but it always bothered me that I didn't insist that he graduate high school. So we're with your mom, and she's talking to the family, and she looks at me, and your mom says, "I'm seeing Nicky. Why is he wearing a cap and gown?" And we were, and the other thing she said, and he's saying something about old bald B guy, old bald.
Oh.
Nicky used to call me the old bald bastard when we were kidding around. When I wasn't around, he'd refer to me laughingly as that. And then I realized that this was Nicky in his cap and gown. This was Nicky telling me that there's more than one way to graduate.
Oh, wow. Yep, he graduated.
Yeah, he really did. And he's showing now that he's got some real good high grades in what he's learned. There's another story I wanted to tell you, and that is about Nick and Chris. Nick and Chris. Chris is the oldest boy. And they're 10 years apart. And Chris and Nicky were joined at the heart. I mean, they were real good pals. And Chris was constantly videotaping Nicky everywhere, in the house, in the car, in the backyard, on stage, in the bathroom. Don't ask. And he just obsessed with it, And he never knew why, but now we know why, because we have the award-winning documentary. And in that documentary, thanks to Chris's video, we see Nicky from when he's wearing that 41 on his cap to moments before he passes.
Oh, wow.
So you see him going up. Now, the year Nicky passed, it came to be Chris's birthday. And we were all going to Bugaboo Creek, and Chris had asked for a new video camera. So I wanted to get him a Sony, and my wife said, no, we got to get him a Samsung. I said, why? She said, I don't know, but we got to get him a Samsung. So I said, okay. Sony's, by the way, are only $10 more. I'm not that big a spender. So we get him a Samsung, and it's really great because, you take the present now. You don't have to wrap a present. Just put it in a bag, right?
Yeah.
Put some toilet paper on top. It's really cool. So we're going to Bugaboo Creek in the car, and Joe gives Chris his present. He takes the box out, and it's a Samsung camera, and he starts to open the box, and he stops, and he says to his mom, "Mom, I guess, you see, every year when it was Chris's birthday, he let Nicky blow out his candles." So we're going to Bugaboo, and he opens the box. He said, "Hey, Mom, I guess this year I have to blow out my own candles." And he opens the box, and he takes out a brochure. And on the brochure is a picture of a little boy blowing out the candles on a birthday cake. This one.
Wow.
This one. And this is Nicky and look at them together now. They are absolutely identical. That picture on the left was a picture that Joanne thought was from a Disney cruise we went on.
Mm-hmm.
And it took me 6 years to get somebody at Samsung to talk to me because they thought they used my son's picture without permission.
Mm.
I finally got a hold of a female executive, of course, they're smarter. And she said, I don't think this is your son. She said, I'm going to have the photographer call you. And the following Tuesday morning, the photographer called me at 11:41 in the morning and said to me, Mr. Kane, we did this shoot in San Diego. It's not your son. I'm going to send you all the pictures from that so you'll see.
Mm-hmm.
And when I got the pictures, in none of the other pictures does this boy look as much like Nicky as he does in this one.
Wow.
Happy birthday, Chris.
So, Dave, I hear that there's a family foundation. What is the family foundation?
Forever Family Foundation. Very cool. This is an organization that was founded by Fran and Bob Ginsberg. They live in Long Island. And the Ginsbergs, Bob Ginsberg was not into any of the stuff that I talk about. He didn't believe if he couldn't eat it, drive it, dance with it, or make love to it, he didn't believe it. That was it. He didn't.
Mm.
And he was not somebody involved in the faith like I am about this. And then their daughter Bailey was killed in a car accident on Long Island. And Bailey was just 14. And the day of her funeral, her best friend came to them and said, listen, you need to know this. She said, when Bailey and I were 12 years old, we made a pact with each other that if anything happened to us, we would let the other one know that we were okay. We would send a sign. And Bailey's sign was a blue magic marker.
Wow.
And when this girl got home from the service that day, on her keyboard of her computer was a blue magic marker.
Wow.
Now, she didn't have one. She didn't know where it came from. Couldn't believe it. And Bob Ginsberg said, that's it. I'm going to find out once and for all now if this is baloney or real.
Mm.
So he started the Forever Family Foundation. They hooked up with the University of Arizona, Dr. Schwartz, and they tested mediums. John Edward was one of the mediums they tested. It was a special on HBO. He came out very high in numbers, and so they started this Forever Family to prove that this afterlife stuff is for real. And it's been really something. One of the interesting parts of it is they have a board of mediums, and every year they ask they have a board of mediums. Let me take that back. They have a board of people on this side, but they have a board of people on the other side who have passed. And then they bring in mediums, and the mediums tell them what the board from who has passed wants to do.
Mm-hmm.
And one night they were meeting, and one of the mediums said, there's a young man here who passed in a fire. And Bob and Fran said, well, we know who that is. Wow. She said, well, he's insisting I call him Uncle Nick. I call him Uncle Nick. So when we heard this, of course, we went out and we bought a little knitted sweater on a hanger, and we waited. Thanksgiving comes, nothing. Christmas comes, nothing. Finally, right after Christmas, Chris, the oldest boy, and his wife come to us and say, we got a surprise for you. We're pregnant. I said, well, we got a surprise for you. We already knew. And I held up the sweater, right? So that was a pretty cool sign.
Yeah.
Nick wanted to let everybody know. I'll tell you another thing about another sign that you might like, by the way. Speaking of that, this is really cool. Chris and Leah, that's his wife, Leah, they were living in New York for a while. Chris was doing some stage directing and going to college, getting another master's degree. And Leah was working in library sciences. And they came back and they went to Watertown, Massachusetts. They got a place. And when they got this place, your mother said to us, Nicky wants to know where his room's going to be. So we laughed. We thought that was cute. Okay. Well. And about 2 weeks later, at that address, they got a color brochure from IKEA.
Oh, wow.
And it said, "Welcome to Watertown, Nick O'Neill."
Wow.
Okay, that's pretty cool. They eventually moved back to Brooklyn.
Mm-hmm.
They get to Brooklyn. They're there about a month. They get a color brochure. "Welcome to Brooklyn, Nick O'Neill." So that happened.
Mm.
Then, when they were in Watertown, I forgot to mention, when they were in Watertown, Chris came down to our house to get something, and he used his key, got in the house to get something. And then he realized that the key that he used to get in was the key from his own house in Watertown.
Oh, wow.
And when we went up there, we tried our key in his door, and it worked. So this was Nicky showing that he can get in any way he wants, and that he was going to get his room in Watertown. I had an interesting thing happen, and people always ask me, did I believe in this before Nicky passed? I believed in it, but I didn't have the evidence that I have now. Many years ago, I found my mother died in the kitchen, and I found her about 3 days later. And when I walked in, I could see, I got to her house, and I just had the feeling, and her living room shades were up a little bit, just a little bit. So I looked in the room, in the window, and I could see her on the floor of the kitchen. So I used my key, and I went in, I walked in, and I stood over her. And I said to her, "Okay, Mom, I'll take care of everything." Now, while I was standing over here, I could feel a presence over my shoulder. I didn't know what it was. And when I said, "Okay, Mom, I'll take care of everything," and as soon as I said that, I felt it disappear, leave. After I read the book Life After Life, and in that book, it talks about how spirit stays with the body until somebody finds it. I was doing a television show, doing an interview about this topic, 41. And after the show, one of the cameramen came up to me and said, "We meet every Wednesday night, and we do a Ouija board thing," right? Now, this was back a lot of years. And I didn't know about anything about it. I mean, I knew what it was, and I know there's feelings that there are bad spirits and good spirits, and
right.
I don't accept bad spirits. I just ignore it. I don't give it any credence. But anyway, at the time and still now, I don't want to turn down any opportunity Nicky might be using to get through. So I said, okay, we were invited over. So my wife did not want to go. She was very uncomfortable, but we went to this guy's home, and these people came, and they set up, and they started doing this. And at one point, and my wife was just not happy. She, and so then the host said, "Well, why don't you put your hand on the mouse, whatever that thing is? What do they call that? The Boolean or whatever it is."
The mouse, yeah.
No, it's not a mouse. On the Ouija board, they call it something else.
Oh, yeah. What are the
anyway? It looks like a mouse. So anyway, he said, "Why don't you put your hand on this with me, and we'll see if Nicky's got anything to say if he's here." And she did.
Yeah.
And the mouse went, "Go home." Went to the two words, "Go home."
Wow.
And I looked at my wife, and I said, "Well, thanks very much. It's been a lovely evening. We'd love to stay and talk to you, but we're out of here now." And we left. But I mean, that was really cool. That was
on your radio show that you have. Do you have any? Do you have a specific format that you follow, or is it just?
No, it's really kind of eclectic. I have 3 hours every Saturday morning, 9 to noon, on WARA radio. WARA. You can hear it online at wararadio.com. Saturday mornings at 9. And I have all different things. I do political stuff, and I certainly do spiritual things. I do medium stuff. I do. I'm going to have a magician on Saturday on the radio. How cool is that?
That is cool.
We're all just going to sit around and go, ooh, how good. I can't believe you did that. Right? No, and Lon Serro.
Can you record video so you can place it afterwards?
We actually do. We actually do have video cameras in.
Oh, good.
We have AI, artificial intelligence cameras. So when you talk in your mic, the cameras turn to you, and when I talk on my mic, they turn to me. It's very spooky stuff. And and of course it's a local talk show base, so that there's a lot of political stuff. We just had a primary election, and there's going to be a mayoral election in 8 weeks, 6 weeks, and so we talk about that too. I get calls. I mean, I have listeners because we're online. I have listeners. I was talking to a family in India.
Oh.
And they were my guests on, and we were one of the things we're talking about is pre-life, life from before. And I think that there's a lot of this happens in India because they believe in reincarnation. Sure. And there are stories about boys, young boys or girls, but a young boy who wanted to go back to this town that he had never been to, and told a whole story about how he was married and he had kids and he had a store there. And so his parents, because he was bugging them, said, okay. And they got in this kind in India, they drove like 40, 50 miles to this town. And when they get there, and the kid told them where to go, what street to take, and when they got there were people from the town that had come to see what happened. And this guy comes out of the crowd, and the little boy looks at the guy and says, Rajesh, this is my son. This is my son. And the kid starts telling the son all about stuff that happened to the son when he was a little boy.
Wow. And
so this, living before stuff is really cool.
Yeah. Do you believe in past lives?
Oh, sure. I believe in past lives, but here's the thing: I would not be regressed.
Oh, you wouldn't be regressed?
No. And the only reason I wouldn't be regressed is going back to something else I said earlier. I wouldn't trust it for me because my imagination, that I might subconsciously make up a bunch of stuff in my imagination. Yeah. That is baloney. Yeah. I mean, who knows? But I mean, but I do believe that it happens. I absolutely believe in it. I just wouldn't trust me. Who knows what I'd say?
Yeah, I feel at times everybody's connected, and we don't meet people by happenstance. And I think things happen for a reason.
Oh, there's no doubt. There's no doubt. As I said, this woman that I met who I dated 46 years ago.
Yeah.
She hooked me up to the people that are producing Nikki's movie now.
Wow.
I mean, that's crazy. And everything that led up to Nikki and his being here and his being alive, there are so many things that happened that you wouldn't think were possible. Yet it happened. And it's great.
That is.
It's great.
Well, I know one thing. My mother really appreciated your friendship. So
Good. Thank you. I certainly did all I could to let everybody know about her. I dropped her name everywhere.
I know, and she appreciated that.
Yeah.
She would tell me, "Oh, I just got another call from the book."
I mean, well,
she always used to get emails or calls that from people all over.
Yes,
said,
yes,
she's in the book. So
she was prominently featured because she started this trek. She started this trek, and she was the first one that let me know something was going on. I had no idea.
Yeah.
But now I know. Yeah. And when she passed on 4/1, I said, "See, this is all supposed to be." Yeah. I mean, I hadn't had your mom on the air with me probably in a year and a half.
At least, yeah.
At that time.
Yeah.
And for her to call me on the morning after and to have that thing happen to her, my son was smart enough to know to go to her.
Yeah.
Now think about that. He, of all the people, of all the connections,
That's true.
I know thousands of people.
Yeah.
Thousands of people know me.
Yeah.
But Nikki knew, go to your mom. She'd make it happen.
Yeah.
She'd make the connection.
Yeah.
It's astounding.
Yeah,
it's wonderful.
Yeah.
And of course, I know a lot of people. And by the way, in my talk, 41 Signs of Hope, I talked about her every time. She was one of the stories that I told first.
Interesting.
Yeah, yeah. And the other thing, I never said this. I always say it at the beginning of the interviews, but I'll just say it now. This 41 number is very important. 41 was Nikki's number. He didn't know why. 41 was his number. He'd get in the car with me, he'd say, Dad, look, 241. Or he'd see a license plate, Dad, 4141. We never knew what it was. When he passed, he was 18 and 23 days, 41. The station nightclub is at latitude 41.41. The fire call box of the station was 4414. And on the cover of the book, of course, is a picture of Nicky from a videotape we found a year after he passed. And in the videotape, his mom's holding him. He's about 4 months old. He has a little baseball uniform on.
And it says 41.
And the number on the cap is 41.
Wow.
Which you'll be able to see in the movie if you go see the movie.
Yes.
So it was alive and well and happening from the time he was that little.
Yes. So if anybody wants to pick up Dave Kane's book,
it's on Amazon. Very simple. 41
And
Signs of Hope. Just go to Amazon. They're doing well. They're doing very well.
And the movie 41's on Prime.
The movie 41. Now listen, there are 3 41s. One is about George Bush. The other one is about a kid who found a hole in a floor in a motel or something. And then the other one is Nikki. So read the description. But Amazon Prime has 41. And it's also on iTunes. You can rent it from iTunes if you'd like as well.
Great.
And so thank you for this.
Well, thank you, Dave. I truly appreciate it, and I welcome you anytime on the show.
Oh, great!
I'd love for you to be here again. You've got so many phenomenal, incredible stories,
and it keeps going on.